Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is pull, and this is actually the third video in our series all about the verb pull. Our viewer Luis in Nicaragua made this great suggestion earlier, and there are so many phrasal verbs and different definitions with the verb pull. I decided to break things down into 3 videos this week. So let's dive in and talk a little more about this verb. Now, in the first part of the video, or first part of this series of videos this week, I talked about how the verb pull generally means we are exerting force and bringing something close, more closely toward us. And connected to that, we've talked about some other definitions. So the first one I'm going to start today with is you might hear this verb pull used to make certain types of candy. So, and this stretching is generally done while it is cooling. I've got a picture here of someone who is pulling taffy, a particular type of a very chewy kind of candy. So you can kind of see them stretching that out. Related to that is another definition you might hear. Pull can mean to draw something out from the skin. So sometimes with certain beauty products, right? You might hear this pulls out oil from the skin, right? It draws it out. So it's still that idea of exerting force out and away from something. A third way you might hear pull used can mean to extract. And that you might remember is like removing, taking something out. It's most common to hear pull used when someone needs to have a tooth removed. You might hear they're having their wisdom teeth pulled, right? They are coming out or they're being taken out permanently. Again, as we've been talking about all this week, pull is a regular verb. To make the progressive form, all we need to do is add ing, and that forms pulling. The past tense and participle forms of this verb are made by adding ed. Our base verb, pull, ends in a voiced sound. This means the ed ending is just going to make a d sound. And I'm not going to add an extra syllable as I say it. So it should sound like this: pulled, pulled. Okay. Now I think we're ready to continue our discussion of phrasal verbs. Today, the first phrasal verb we'll discuss is to pull off. This can have several different meanings. One way you might hear it be used means to forcibly remove something. An example of this might be, the nurse pulled off his bandage, right? So you might think they were using some force. There's some of that adhesive or maybe kind of sticky substance. And sometimes that's a painful thing, right? As that bandage is being removed. Now, a second way you might hear pull off used can mean to be able to perform or complete something under some challenging or difficult circumstances. An example of this might be, we pulled off the surprise party in less than a week. So here we were able to successfully organize an event, invite people, get the guest of honor to show up without knowing that maybe it was a party in their honor. So we were successful, right? It has a rather positive meaning there. And I should note the first two examples I've used, the nurse pulled off and we pulled off the surprise party, are both affirmative or positive simple past tense sentences. A third way you might hear pull off used can mean to exit a road or a highway. Here's an imperative or a command with that phrasal verb. Pull off at the next exit for a bathroom break. Right? So maybe you're taking a road trip with someone, right? And they're telling you, you need to exit so that we can use the bathroom. The next phrasal verb we'll discuss is to pull on. This can have a number of different meanings. The first you might encounter is to tug or yank at something, right? So you might think of Again, that idea of exerting force. So here is a negative imperative, a negative command. Don't pull on those loose threads, right? So here maybe something is becoming a little loose or undone, right? And if you pull, right, maybe more threads will also loosen. A second way to use pull on can mean just to put on clothing. An example of this: I'll pull on a jacket and then we'll go. This is simple future using will, so someone is possibly making an offer or a promise to do this particular action. A third way to use pull on can mean to draw a weapon and aim it or direct it at another individual. An example of this: the robbers pulled a gun on the bank tellers. So teller is an example of an employee who works at a bank. And this type of sentence is another simple past tense, kind of a scary sentence, but you might be able to kind of picture what that third way to use the phrasal verb is. A fourth way to use pull on can mean to fool, deceive, or trick someone. An example of this: are you pulling a trick on me? So here's a present progressive yes or no question, or present continuous yes or no question, right? Now, I want to know if someone is trying to trick me, maybe with their words or maybe actions as well. The next phrasal verb we'll discuss is to pull over. This can have a couple meanings. One would just mean to drive a vehicle to the side of the road. Right? An example of this: pull over, there's an ambulance behind us. There's another imperative sentence or a positive command, right? So maybe a passenger is talking to the person who's driving the car, and they notice we've got this emergency vehicle, so we need to move out of the way. Now, a second way pull over gets used can mean to command a driver to the side of the road. And you might be thinking, well, Katie, the previous example was you were telling someone. This second one, I would add maybe with legal authority. You're telling someone to pull the car to the side of the road. So how we'll most likely hear this used is the police pulled over several intoxicated drivers last night. So generally, if we have active voice sentences, police, cops, other legal authorities would be the ones most likely doing this action, commanding someone to move to the side of the road. My example sentence there, the police pulled over, is another simple past tense sentence that's affirmative or positive. The next phrasal verb we'll discuss is to pull through. This can mean to give care so that someone is able to survive a life-threatening type of situation. An example of this might be: is she going to pull through this next operation? Right? So this is something very, very serious. This is not like a quick minor thing where maybe someone's doing something for a little better quality of life. Their life in the situation depends on it. Is she going to pull through is an example of the simple future using be going to. It's a yes or no question. The next phrasal verb we'll discuss is to pull under. This can mean that something is being dragged, yanked, or tugged under a particular surface. We could be describing a person or a thing that is being pulled down. An example of this: this strong current can pull under swimmers in an instant. This sentence uses the modal can. So here we're really talking about ability. So the current, right, the waves, the way the water is moving, has this ability to take someone underneath in just a split second. That's what instant is being used as there. The next phrasal verb we'll discuss is to pull up. This can have a number of different meanings. The first is to bring something close to someone or something. An example of this: pull up a chair and let's catch up. So here, someone is telling you, move a chair closer to me, and then let's have a conversation. This is another imperative sentence where we're telling someone to do a particular action. A second way to use pull up can mean to maneuver a car alongside or in front of something and then stop the car. An example of this: the car pulled up next to me at the stoplight and started honking. There's another simple past tense sentence, right, describing completed actions. I would always be curious to kind of like, ooh, what happened next after they started honking? Maybe they were trying to warn them about some kind of dangerous situation, or maybe it was a friend, right? Who knows? The next way, the third way to use pull up can mean to open a source of information. I hear this phrasal verb anytime I need to call customer service with a question about an account or a service. Frequently, I hear things like, I'll pull up your account and look at your billing history. So this is simple future, right? Again, another promise there with will. So someone is saying, I'm going to open sort of my organization's system to find or locate this information. A fourth way to use pull up is used in connection to airplanes. So you're forcing the nose or the very front of a plane upward. An example of this: just as they started to land, the pilot pulled up and circled around, right? So we can kind of imagine a plane is descending, right? Going down like it's going to land, and then all of a sudden, right, the nose or the front of it turns up. The last way we're going to talk about using pull up can mean to pull a plant out of the soil. So you're taking it out of the ground. An example of how you might hear this: I've been pulling up weeds all morning. This is an example of the present perfect progressive or present perfect continuous, right? Where we're talking about an action that started in the past and is continuing into the present. Now, let's spend just a few more minutes discussing some additional phrases related to pull. And the first one we're going to talk about today is the phrase to pull a fast one. When people use this, they are suggesting or maybe outright saying that someone is trying to cheat or trick someone else. An example of this might be, your internet provider may be pulling a fast one on you. You should check your bill for junk fees. Right? Well, there are some new rules in the United States regarding kind of these additional fees that are placed on many different kinds of services. And sometimes people don't look very closely at bills and invoices to see everything. This sentence is encouraging people to look for more detail and question what certain charges or fees might be, and if those are legal. Another phrase you might encounter is to pull the plug. This can have a couple different meanings. One is a rather sad thing to think about, but it's the idea of disconnecting some type of medical life support system. So I will note many times people use this kind of as they talk about themselves. It's usually not done in a serious or sort of real way. They might be talking about way into the future and their plans. So you might hear somebody say something like this: if I'm ever in a coma for more than a month, you can pull the plug, right? So they might be saying or suggesting, right, I don't want to live like that. So you could stop the medical life support that I'm receiving. Now, just saying that is not good enough here in the United States. This is generally something you need to have spelled out legally. There are certain directives or legal documents is probably the simplest way to describe it, that one completes and shares with family members so they would know what to do in a very serious situation. Now, I want to note, if you are a person working in a medical profession, right, I would not use this phrase with a patient the patient's family. I might even be very careful about using it with my coworkers because it can seem like, just like it's no big deal, right? And in those types of situations, they tend to be extremely serious. People are very upset, very sad. And so we want to really be kind and respectful in those types of situations. So I think it's good for us sometimes to know what certain phrases mean, but it doesn't always mean we should use them. So, but let's talk about a second way to use pull the plug. And really, what that means is one is withdrawing or stopping some type of an essential support. And many times it's financial in nature, so it's connected to money. An example of this: the CEO pulled the plug on the product after 6 months of weak sales. What it means is we've decided we're not going to produce, manufacture, sell this item any longer. It's not making us money, right? So we're withdrawing or ending the support. Another phrase you might encounter is to pull the rug, and you might hear it from under or out from under. Generally, what this means is someone is weakening or maybe creating sort of an unsettled type of environment by removing support or assistance from either someone or something. An example of this: the city's 6-month pause on renewable energy projects really pulled the rug out from under us. We can't proceed with our solar project. I saw sentences very close to this. This is describing a real thing that happened. So a city created a policy where they were not going to start any new renewable energy projects for a 6-month period. And there was an organization that had one almost ready to go, just about ready to start, and it has stopped. It's weakened. It's unsettled this project, right? They cannot begin it because of I think it was a city ordinance, which you might think of as similar to a law. One last phrase with pull, and that phrase is to pull the trigger. Trigger was a recent verb of the day, a pretty popular one. And so I thought I would revisit this phrase because it, again, is something we hear pretty often. And that is to make a very decisive move or action, right? So it's not like you're going between this or that, right? You have decided, right? There's my course of action. An example of this: we finally pulled the trigger and bought a new car. Right? So this might describe somebody who has spent several months looking, maybe reading about different cars, test driving different ones, really thinking deeply about what would be best. And now this sentence indicates they finally did it. Thank you all so much for watching this week's videos, and a special thanks to Luis for making this recommendation. Have a wonderful day, everyone.